Laura, we're ready whenever you are.
Oh, okay. So today, after that dive into the need analysis and all that craziness, we are going to be going over the campus-based programs. So this is probably going to be a little bit lighter, not too many formulas going on. So sit back and relax and we'll get through this. So pretty much we did have a quiz question on this yesterday about the campus-based programs and what they are. And that quiz question, the answer was the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, which I will be saying SEOG from now on. Federal Work Study. And if anybody can't hear me, let me know because I know someone had an issue hearing me yesterday. I know I do tend to speak quietly sometimes, but just if you can't hear me, put it in the chat. Federal Work Study, which is FWS, and then also the Federal Perkins Loan Program, which we're not going to go into great depth in that one, but we'll touch base on that for just a little bit. So today what we're going to be doing is we'll be talking about the common provisions between the programs. And then, we'll go in and discuss each program into deeper depth. So how does a school even receive funding for these programs? Well, the first step is for the schools is to do the application process. A school applies to participate in the campus-based programs by completing or updating its electronic application for approval to participate in the federal student aid programs. That is known as the EAP, and it's so much fun to say. So after the EAP is completed and a school is approved to participate in one or more of the campus-based programs, it must submit a fiscal operations report and application to participate, known as the FISAP. I know we all love the FISAP. This is submitted to apply for funds annually for each award year. The school also uses the FISAP to report how it spent the campus-based funds it received for the previous award year. The Department of Ed uses your school's FISAT information to determine your school's funding levels for each program. Okay, so as stated earlier, there are common provisions that are the same or similar for all the campus-based programs. These common provisions include the requirement to provide a non-federal contribution or match for each program for which the school receives a federal allocation, the ability to transfer funds between campus-based programs, the option to carry forward and or carry back SEOG and federal work study funds between award years, the requirement to offer a reasonable portion of a school's campus-based program allocation to independent students and part-time students. And a reasonable portion, 0 or nothing, is not considered a reasonable available portion to these students. A school's entitlement to, to an administrative cost allowance. This is also known as the ACA, and this is for its participation in the campus-based programs, and a penalty for the underutilization of the funds. Okay, so this slide right here is it's the 3 programs for the campus-based programs. I just have it in here again to show the Perkins loan. I think we kind of all spoke about this. Janet touched on it with Sputnik, which was really neat. But it's just to show that the authorization for the Perkins loan ended on September 30th, 2017. So no more disbursements of Perkins loans were allowed after June 30th of 2018. But schools may continue to service and collect on the Perkins loan after this date. Just a little info on the Perkins loan. It is a loan that was offered by the schools themselves for students that demonstrated high financial need. It is a loan separate from the federal direct loans. The maximum repayment period for a federal Perkins loan is 10 years. So students are still currently in repayment on these loans. Students are eligible for deferment, forbearance, cancellation, and discharge of the Perkins loan. They can also default on the Perkins loan and rehabilitate the loan if they would default. There is more in-depth information may be found about the Perkins loan, I believe on pages 47 through 66 of the self-study guides that you have or will be getting. I forget what Melissa said. So The next thing we're going to be discussing about these programs is one of the common provisions of the matching requirements. So not all of the funding for the campus-based programs comes from the federal government. So schools match a portion of federal funds for each campus-based program. Campus-based awards are made up of federal dollars, which are allocated by the Department of Ed, and a matching amount from the school itself. With very few exceptions, schools that participate in the campus-based programs must provide non-federal funds as a match for the federal funds they receive. The non-federal share must be made from the school's own resources, and it may include institutional scholarships and grants, waivers of tuition and fees, non-federal portions of state scholarships and grants, funds from foundations or other charitable organizations. So that's how the non-federal funds could be matched. And then, sorry. So what happens is for the matching requirement for the federal work-study program, a school is required to provide an institutional match that must be deposited either prior or to the same time as the federal funds. Then this non-federal share is contributed by the school from a source other than the federal government, which we just discussed all those options. All student offers must be comprised of both the non-federal and federal contributions. A school must provide at least 25% of the non-federal share for work with a public agency, private nonprofit organization, or school. So what this means is that the typical breakdown of funding is 75% federal and 25% non-federal. So an example of this would be, let's say your school completes the phys app and you get the information of what you're going to be receiving as an allocation from the federal government, and you're going to be receiving $63,750 in federal work-study funds. The school then is required to contribute a 25% non-federal share of this amount. So to figure this out, you divide the federal allocation of $63,750 by 3 to determine the non-federal share of $21,250. Then what you do is you add the non-federal share and the federal share together for a total allocation of $85,000 of federal work-study funds. So that equals 25% of 85,000 is 21,250, which is the school's portion, the non-federal share, and 75% is the 63,750, which is the federal share allocated from the federal government. Of course, like anything in financial aid, there are exceptions to the matching of the funds for the federal work-study program. You can see there's a little box over here showing these exceptions. What they are is, first, no institutional match is required if a school is designated as a Title III or Title IV eligible institution. This means 100% of federal work-study funds would be from the federal government. There's a list on page 3 of the self-study guide of the 11 programs under which the Department of Ed designates the school as Title III or Title IV eligible institution. Just to give you a few examples, the type of programs that they are developing Hispanic Serving Institutions program, American Indian Tribally Controlled Colleges and Universities program, Strengthening Historically Black Colleges and Universities program. So this just gives you an idea of the types of Title III and Title IV programs. So that's in this first one right here. The second exception is for students working at a nonprofit. The federal share can be as much as 90%, and the non-federal share can be as little as 10% for students employed at a private nonprofit organization or at a federal or state local organization. Only organizations that are unable to afford the cost of this employment are eligible to pay a reduced non-federal share. In addition, the school may not own, operate, or control the organization, and the school must select the organization or agency on a case-by-case basis. So again, the 90% non-federal share is permitted if the student is employed at a public agency or private nonprofit organization. No ownership, operation, or control relationship exists between the school and the employee organization. The school selects the organization or agency on a case-by-case basis. and then no more than 10% of the school's total federal work study recipients are paid using the higher federal share. Okay, so the third exception, this is another 100% federal share, and this would be for community service federal work study. That would be right here. The federal share of compensation paid to students employed as reading tutors for children, mathematic tutors for children, or in a family literacy project performing family literacy activities may exceed 75% and may be as high as 100%. So a federal share of 100% is permitted for work with a school, public agency, or private nonprofit or organization if the student is, again, performing family literacy activities, a reading tutor for preschool age or elementary school children, a mathematics tutor for children in elementary school through 9th grade, or performing civic education and participation activities in a community service project. A fourth exception would be a 50% federal share and actually a 50% employer share. This is for student employment out of for-profit. It's down here in the corner. A non-federal share of at least 50% is required for employment by a private for-profit organization. For off-campus federal work study jobs with private for-profit organizations, the federal share of wages paid to students is limited to 50%. The for-profit organization or employer must provide a non-federal share of at least 50%, but may contribute more. For this exception, the employer must be the provider of the non-federal share. A maximum of 25% of a school's federal work study allocation may be used to pay wages to students employed with private for-profit organizations. Okay, so that was federal work study and the exceptions for the matching requirements for federal work study. Next, we'll talk about the SEOG program and the matching requirements. So the SEOG program also requires a school to provide a non-federal share of at least 25% of its total SEOG funds awarded. The non-federal share of the allocation, again, may be made up of those options such as grants, scholarships, tuition or fee waivers, the non-federal portion of grants and scholarships, or private grants or scholarships. Now for SEOGs, schools have 3 different options in how the match requirement may be met. Schools may meet the SEOG requirement based on, there's a first option of on an individual student basis in which each recipient receives an appropriate ratio of non-federal funds. And then there's a second option of an aggregate basis in which each recipient receives some federal funds and the total SEOG awarded compromises no more than 75% of federal funds. And then there's a third option is a fund-specific basis in which the required non-federal match is deposited into the SEOG fund from which offers are made. So what happens is to use this method, the school would establish a separate SEOG account for federal program funds. The required 25% non-federal match would be deposited into the fund, and awards for SEOG recipients would be made directly from this combined fund. Exceptions for SEOG, as is the case with federal work study, no institutional match is required if a school is designated as a Title III or V eligible institution. So that's a little bit about the matching requirements for work study and SEOG. Next, we're going to be talking about a common provision of the transfer of funds between the programs. So schools have some flexibility to move funds between these programs. The transferring funds between campus-based programs is allowed without having to obtain permission from the Department of Ed. However, a school may not transfer funds from a program it has not made offers from during an award year. For example, so if you have federal work studies not offered for the 2021 year, you may not transfer monies from the federal work study program to the SEOG program and vice versa. For all campus-based programs, transfers funds not used at the end of the award year must be returned to the original program. The transfer must also be reported on the FISAP. So touching base with the Perkins loan crossed out, obviously it's no longer, schools no longer have the option to transfer funds from the Perkins loan program. Okay, so then we'll talk about the transferring from federal work study to SEOG. The Department of Ed allows a transfer of 25% of the total federal work study allocation to the SEOG program. There is an exception to this, however, and that is there must be an allocation for both federal work study and SEOG, and offers have been made for both programs during the award year. The next slide is a transfer of, transfer of funds between SEOG to federal work study. It's pretty much the same thing. The Department of Ed allows up to 25% of SEOG funds to be transferred to federal work study. So I just have a quick question. Why do you think the schools are allowed to transfer funds between the federal work study and the SEOG programs? I don't know if anybody's involved in their federal work study program at their school. So pretty much, I mean, I know I just threw this question kind of in there, but basically what it's doing is it's the flexibility helps for schools to ensure that they can meet the matching requirements that we just talked about. So if school needs more funds than it allows, if it needs more funds in another, let's say you need more SEOG funds, you could transfer from federal work study and vice versa. So it just helps to, if the school needs more funds, and it allows to transfer them between to adjust accordingly the amounts between the two programs. So we touched on this a little bit earlier. Funds must be made reasonably available for independent and part-time students if an allocation, which is based on the FISAP information, is based directly or indirectly on the financial need of such students. Students may receive federal work study payments during periods of part-time attendance. Federal work study program does not have a minimum enrollment requirement. Schools cannot deny students access to federal work study funds based on enrollment status or dependency status. The federal work study, the SEOG program also does not have a minimum enrollment requirement, and a financially needy student should not be denied access to SEOG funding due to their enrollment status or dependency status, just the same as the federal work study program. So basically, if a dependent and part-time student demonstrates need, and they're reported on the FISAP, which the FISAP is used to determine the allocation the school is getting, then they should not be denied a share of those funds. Okay, so give it a little break. We're going to go over a few questions of things we went over. If you want to throw in the chat, or we can see how you want to answer, or yell out, doesn't matter to me. Where does a school start if it wishes to participate in the campus-based programs? Remember, there's two forms in the beginning.
EAP. EAP.
Yeah.
FISAP.
Okay, that's good. That was thrown in there. The answer is the EAP. The FISAP is that is to report how the funds are spent, and to apply for the funds annually for each year. So to participate it, you do the EAP. Once that's approved, then every year annually you have to complete the FISAP. So good. I'm glad someone said the FISAP. So the next question. No institutional match to funds for the federal work study program is required if the institution is designated as this type of eligible institution. If we're not getting answers or you're not sure, that would be your Title III and Title V eligible institutions. I gave a few examples, and in the self-study guide, there's I think there's about 11 programs that fall under this. What are 3 ways a school can meet the matching requirement for the SEOG program? This is a little bit of a longer answer to put in the chat, but I just wanted to review it again with all of you. So the 3 matching requirements are the ways they can do it is on an individual student basis. if each recipient received an appropriate ratio of non-federal funds. And then there's an aggregate basis in which each recipient receives some federal funds and the total SCOG compromises no more than 75% of federal funds, or a fund-specific basis in which the required non-federal match is deposited into an SCOG fund from which offers are made. Okay, the next question. A school must offer a blank portion of its campus-based program funds to blank and blank students. If you don't get the first one, I'm more concerned that you know what type of students have to be included.
What's the stat?
We have 1, 2 answers. A reasonable portion of its campus-based program funds to independent and part-time students.
Yay, woohoo! Thank you very much for participating. That is correct. So it's important just to remember that independent and part-time students need to be included into your campus-based programs. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so the next thing we're going to discuss is it's called a carry forward option. What this means is students have the option to carry forward campus-based funds from the current award year to the upcoming award year. Some general principles of the carry forward option are the official federal allocation letter from the Department of Ed for a specific award period is what gives a school the authority to carry forward funds. A school cannot carry forward funds to an award year in which there's no allocation of funds. A school's future program allocation is not affected by the option to carry forward funds to the next award year. A school may carry forward up to 10% of its total federal work study and SCOG current award year allocation to be spent in the next award year. Funds carried forward must be spent before spending the current award year funds, and a school must match federal work study funds carried forward in the award year. The funds are spent. So there is a carry forward option. Then I think I have the next. There's also a carry back option. I'm sorry, this is for both federal work study and SCOG. So schools have the option to carry back campus-based funds from the current award year to the prior award year. The same general principles that apply to the carry forward option also apply to the carry back option. So a school may carry back up to 10% of its total federal work study funds and carry back up to 10% of its total SCOG current award year allocation. And this would be used for prior award year expenditures. In other words, a school may spend up to 10% of its current federal work study or SCOG allocation for expenses incurred in the previous award year, which is where you get the carry back. You can see here, you can carry back 10%. So there are summer options when carrying back funds. This is both for federal work study and SCOG for the summer. What these options are is an option is provided to carry back any portion of the federal work study current award year allocation to pay wages earned on or after, there's a date range for summer, May 1st of the preceding award year, but prior to the start of the current award year, which is July 1st. So you can kind of think of that's the summer period. So between May 1st and July 1st. This is in addition to the authority to carry back 10% of the current award year's federal work study or SCOG allocation for use during the previous award year. So that's in addition to the 10%, you can also carry back funds to help assist with expenditures during May 1st and July 1st. Due to the end of the Perkins loan, funds cannot be transferred nor carried back or forward. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the administrative cost allowance. And what the administrative cost allowance is, it's also known as the ACA. To help with the cost of administering the campus-based program, the Department of Ed permits each school to have an administrative cost allowance. An ACA may be claimed by schools that participate in any of the campus-based programs. The ACA allows schools to offset the costs of administrating the campus-based programs, also as well as for the federal Pell Grant program. An ACA may be claimed for each award year a school receives an allocation of campus-based funds. The amount is based on the total campus-based funds used to pay federal work-study wages and SEOG. A school's ACA is based on the total awarded in all of its campus-based programs. The ACA it's actually deducted from an allocation, so it's not considered additional money. A school also has the option of charging the ACA against one or more of its campus-based programs for which disbursements were made for that award year. So we can discuss what the ACA can be used for. The ACA may be used to pay for costs for administrating the campus-based and federal programs, including but not limited to, you can see we'll run through these, conducting a school's community service, training federal work-study tutors, complying with Title IV consumer information requirements, payment of staff salaries, acquiring items for offices such as furniture, supplies, and computer equipment, and travel such as training for staff. Again, it's no longer applicable for the federal Perkins loan. So what I wanted to do is just, sorry, I didn't make a slide for this, but what I wanted to do is just go over a little bit of an example. And so let's say you're running a monitoring report that alerts you that you are spending less than you projected from your federal work-study allocation. And based on your current payroll trend, you're going to have more than 10% of your allocation remaining at the end of the year. So you want to take action to ensure that you don't have to return any unused allocations. We'll talk about that in a minute, but so which one of the followings would not be allowable for you to do with your available funding? So just to, and I'll go through each one and we can decide yes or no. But so I'll go over it again. So your federal work-study, you're spending less than your projected federal work-study allocation. So, and then based on your current payroll trend, you're going to have more than 10% of your allocation remaining. And you don't want to have to return any of the funds, which is a requirement. If you don't use all your funding, you have to return it. So you don't want to return any of this federal work-study funding. So which of the following actions would be allowable for you to do or would not be allowable for you to do? So could you carry forward up to 10% of your federal work-study funds to next year? Is that something you could do so you don't have to return any of it? And yes, you can. Thank you. Great job. Sorry. Yeah, I can't see the chat.
Everyone could. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Could you make additional federal work-study awards? You know, use the funds and give additional federal work-study awards. The answer to that is yes. You could use the additional funds.
We have a lot of yeses and one yes.
Yes, maybe. I know it's a little confusing because it says the end of the award year, but you could certainly make additional federal work-study awards. The next one, could you carry back up to 25% of your federal work-study funds to the previous year? Good, great. Looks like you're shaking your head. That is a no. That is correct because you can only carry back 10%. So you could carry back, but you could only do 10%. You couldn't do 25%. So how about, could you transfer up to 25% to SEOG for the award year? So transfer 25% of federal work-study to SEOG.
We have a yes and we have a no.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering. So the answer is yes. You can transfer up to 25% to SEOG for the award year. So, you know, this is just an example of if you use a lot more of SEOG funds than you have maybe work-study funds or students using work-study, you could transfer to help award SEOG to students. What about claiming the SEOG ACA from the federal work study allocation? So you would use the extra federal work study funds to claim ACA. So the answer to that one is yes. You do have to remember that ACA is not extra funding. It has to be actually taken from federal work study or SEOG. So if you have that federal work study, you could use it to help claim some of the ACA. Okay, thank you for participating. Okay, so I just touched a little bit on this in this question. I probably should have done this after that question, but anyway, after going over this. But next, we're going to talk about underutilization of the allocation that you receive. So what happens if you cannot spend all your federal work study or SEOG funds? So a school must notify the Department of Education of funds not spent, and this must be done annually. The funds that are not used by the school must be given back to the Department of Ed to be given to other schools that need the funds. When schools return unexpended allocations, the Department of Ed can reallocate the money to schools that need additional funds. This is called a supplemental allocation. So the reason why the question before, I wanted to go over the different options because there are consequences if you don't use all the funding. So if more than 10% of the campus-based program's allocated amount is returned to the Department of Ed, then that program's allocation for the following year is reduced by the dollar amount returned. So unfortunately, even if it isn't true, not using all the money that was allocated to a school sends the message that your institution does not need as much funding for the next award year. So again, that was the example we just went over of, if you believe that this might happen, you could try to, look at what's available and what are your options to carry forward, carry back, or transferring of funds. Now, if the circumstances are beyond a school's control and the underutilization is not expected to happen again, then the school may request a waiver of the penalty. So when a school submits the FISAP, they may request a waiver and submit an explanation of the circumstances surrounding the reason or reasons for not using all the funds. Example could be, well, right now it could be a federally declared disaster. That could be a reason, but that is something that a waiver could be requested. Now, I did want to say there's a great, on page 11 of the self-study guide, there's a chart. It's kind of big, so I didn't put it in here, but it breaks down the common provisions that we just went over between federal work study and SEOG. It does have the Perkins Loan Program in there as well, but it does show everything we discussed for each program, the matching requirements, the transfer of funds between the programs, the carry forward and carry back options, and the use of funds for independent and part-time students. So I just want to let you know that that is out there and available. So the next thing I want to do, go over a few more questions. So a school can carry back up to 10% of its current award year allocation to cover a prior award year's federal work study expenditures after June 30th. Is this true or false? So this is the carry back option. How much can you carry back? Can you carry back 10%?
True.
Yep. Yay, great. This is true. You can spend up to 10% of your current federal work study allocation for expenses incurred in the previous award year. So the next question, the official award year allocation letter from the Department of Ed is what gives schools the authority to carry forward federal work study and SEOG funds. Okay, so this answer is true.
True. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Sorry,
So
I was
true.
waiting. There's only a couple.
No, I'm sorry. So it is true, but just remember, if no allocation, you cannot carry forward funds And remember, you do not need permission to transfer funds between the programs, but you need the allocation to carry forward funds. Okay, so we talked about the ACA. These are a few examples of the ACA can be used. So which options can be used? We'll just go through them. So can the ACA be used for new furniture for the Federal Work Study Job Coordinator in the financial aid office? Yep, great. Thank you. That it can be. Can it cover travel costs to the FSA conference for training on the campus-based programs? Yes, great. Thank you. How about training Federal Work Study tutors? Yes. How about new computers for staff managing the federal Pell Grant funds? Might be a little tricky. Everyone's saying no. This actually is, it can be used for new computers for staff managing for the federal Pell Grant funds. Because remember, the ACA also can be used for to help manage the Pell Grant program. So that was a little tricky, but it can be used to help with managing Pell Grant. Oh, there's another question. So what periods are covered in the carryback provisions for both federal work study and SCOG? So when can you carry back funds? So this is a little hard to type in there, so I'll just go over it. Schools can carry back funds for the prior award year and also for the period between May 1st and June 30th. Remember, that's the summer period. So you can do it for the prior award year, and you can also do it for the summer period between May 1st and June 30th. So one more question. If a school returns more than blank % of its unused federal work study or SCOG allocation in an award year, its allocation for the next year will be reduced by the amount returned. So how much do you have to return for it to affect the amount you're going to receive?
Everyone is saying 10.
Woo, yay. 10's correct. Okay. So now we have a little bit of problem solving. So summer is a trailer for your institution. Nigel is an incoming transfer student who has been hired to work in the financial aid office during the summer. Nigel has been offered federal work study for the previous fall and spring semesters based upon the FAFSA form. Nigel can be paid federal work study during the summer. How can you ensure funding is in place for him? So again, I don't know if you'll do a long or short answer. But I'll give you guys some time to think about it. You don't have to necessarily put anything in the chat. But the answer is, the funds can be carried back for the period between May 1st and June 30th to cover Nigel's summer wages during that period. So that's a way to help ensure that there is actually federal work study funds available for your federal work study students during the summer. One more. So your institution was one of the many hit hard by a series of tropical storms and hurricanes this past year. As a result of multiple lengthened clothing and disruptions to operations, you have not been able to spend all of your campus-based funds. This has to be reported to the Department of Ed, and you are afraid the school will be penalized next year. What can you do? So there might be some answers coming in, but that's fine. So the answer is what you can do is, actually, I think it comes in here. Yep, so a waiver can be requested along with the completion of the FISAP. The Department of Ed will then consider the extenuating circumstances which are unlikely to occur again. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, so next we're going to talk about eligibility for the students. And look what's on the screen. I told you when I went over student eligibility that this is something that's going to be tattooed into your mind. So here it is again. But first of all, all students have to meet those Title IV general student eligibility criteria. A FAFSA must be filed, and the student must be enrolled or accepted for enrollment in an eligible program at the Title IV eligible institution. So we reviewed these general eligibility requirements on Monday, but I'm just, give your brain a refresher. I'll just list them quickly again, so you remember what these eligibility criteria are. So you have to have a receipt of a high school diploma or its recognized equivalent. No or also homeschooling. No simultaneous enrollment in elementary or secondary school, which would be your dual enrollment. U.S. citizen, U.S. national, or eligible non-citizen. Correct Social Security number. This one no longer. Registration with Selective Service. Sign a statement of educational purpose certifying Title IV aid will only be used to pay for educational purposes. No previous default on Title IV loans or owing a Title IV grant or loan overpayment. No borrowing in excess of annual or aggregate Title IV limits. No property subject to judgment lien. Repayment of fraudulently obtained Title IV funds. No disqualifying drug convictions. No more. And maintain satisfactory academic progress. So just want to get those back in your head again. Of course, well, there's an exception to the general eligibility criteria requirements, and this would be for students in the CTP program. This is for students with intellectual disabilities, and these students may receive SEOG, but they do not have to be attempting to obtain a degree or certificate, and they do not have to have a high school diploma or its equivalent. So that's just one little exception. The next one is they have to demonstrate financial need. So again, cost of attendance minus EFC equals financial need. The student must be enrolled or accepted for enrollment for their first baccalaureate degree. If they are pursuing a second bachelor's degree, then they are not eligible to receive SEOG. Students completing associate degree are eligible to receive SEOG funds. There is no minimum enrollment requirement for SEOG, but if a student is less than full-time, then the funds must be prorated. So let's talk about the annual amounts for SEOG. The SEOG program has both a minimum and maximum award amounts that can be awarded to students for a full award year. The maximum award applies to the combined federal and non-federal share, unless the school has a waiver of the non-federal share. SEOG is provided on an academic year basis, so 1 year at a time. There is a minimum annual amount of $100 and a maximum annual amount of $4,000. So being a campus-based program, schools determine the amount awarded to a student. Because of this, SEOG amounts offered may vary from school to school dependent upon the institution's funding allocation, number of eligible students, and the school's packaging philosophy. This also then students in a study abroad program may receive a maximum amount of up to $4,400. Now, determining who gets the SEOG. So SEOG is awarded using 2 selection groups. Priority order for SEOG recipients is based on Pell Grant eligibility and lowest EFCs. You do have to remember a reasonable portion of the SEOG allocation must be awarded to independent and part-time students. But what we'll do now is we'll review this first SEOG selection group. The regulations instruct that a school must first offer SEOG to students with the lowest EFCs that will be receiving a Pell Grant during the award year. All students in this first selection group may not receive SEOG funds due to schools not having enough SEOG funds available. So depending on how many students are in the first selection group, SEOG funds may run out before all the students in the first selection group receive SEOG funds. So then there's a second selection group. If there are SEOG funds remaining after offering to all the students in the first selection group, then the funds should be offered to the second group, which includes students with the lowest EFCs, but will not receive a Pell Grant during the award year. So this kind of is, I think Janet touched on this briefly one of the reasons why you want to have your students complete their FAFSAs early on, because if you're awarding the SEOG funds, there is a chance they could run out, and then they would be eligible because you ran out of funding. So there is it's not an exception, but what we're going to discuss now is this little box where if a student exceeds their Pell LEU, and so what that is if a student has received their lifetime eligibility in the Pell Grant and have lost their eligibility for the Pell Grant due to reaching the LEU, they are included in the second selection group. Students that receive their LEU, their max LEU, cannot receive SEOG funds until a school has providing funding to all its Pell eligible students. So this is a little tricky here, but a student is eligible for a full award year for SEOG funds. If they receive SEOG and Pell for the fall semester, and then after the fall semester they reached their maximum LEU at the end of the fall semester, this would make them ineligible for the Pell in the spring semester. The student is still eligible to receive SEOG in the spring semester as part of the first selection group. So even if they're not eligible for a full award year Pell Grant, student still receives SEOG for the full award year. All right. Time for another little quiz. Okay, so the student always must meet all Title IV general student eligibility criteria to receive SEOG. I see the word always in there. So I'll just go ahead and, this is normally yes, but of course there's an exception. And the exception is for those students with intellectual disabilities in that CTP program. But otherwise, yes, they have to meet all the Title IV general eligibility criteria. Recipients of SEOG always must be recipients of a federal Pell Grant.
False. False.
Yay! Great, that's correct. So this would be the second selection group. If there are SEOG funds remaining after offering all the students in the first selection group, then the funds should be offered to the second group. And these are students with the lowest EFCs, but will not receive a Pell Grant during the award year. A few more. So except for CTP students, a student receiving SEOG must meet which of the following criteria? So these are general eligibility criteria. Do they need to demonstrate financial need? The almighty formula. That answer is yes, they do have to demonstrate financial need. Do they need to be enrolled full-time to receive SEOG? Correct, they do not need to be enrolled full-time. There's no enrollment requirement. Do they have to be pursuing their first baccalaureate degree? Yes, correct. Have no unresolved Title IV loan defaults or overpayments on record. Okay, and again, except for the CTP students, must they have obtained a high school diploma or recognized equivalent? Absolutely, thank you. So can an SEOG offer vary from school to school? Great, the answer is yes, and that's because it's a campus-based program, so the schools determine the amount awarded to a student. So under what conditions can a student who has exhausted his or her federal Pell Grant LEU receive SEOG funds? So I'll just give it time to think about it in your head because it might be hard to explain in the chat. So this would be an example of if they've exhausted their Pell LEU, they may receive SEOG funds as part of the first selection group if they receive Pell Grant during the award year. A student in this situation could also receive SEOG funds as part of the second selection group if the school has funds remaining after offering the grant to students in the first selection group. So this was that example. Let's say they get a Pell Grant in the fall, use all their they reach their maximum LEU, can't get Pell in the spring, they can still get SEOG in the fall and in the spring. Okay, thank you for participating. So the next thing we're going to talk about now is federal work study. Now the eligibility for federal work study. As with SCOG, students must meet general Title IV eligibility requirements to be eligible for federal work study. Now, undergraduate and graduate students who demonstrate financial need may participate in the federal work study program. A student must be enrolled or accepted for enrollment and an undergraduate, graduate, or professional degree seeking student. There is no minimum enroll requirement level for federal work study, but schools must make a reasonable portion of the federal work study funds, again, available to both full-time and part-time students. This includes 3/4 time, half-time, and less than half-time students as well. So I think I said the school determines amounts, but offer amounts, sorry, the school does determine the offer amounts. There's no regulation set on the minimum maximum award amount for federal work study. However, school may determine minimum and maximum awards as part of its packaging policy. So use of federal work study funds. A school may use its allocation of federal work study funds in several different ways. They may be used for the federal share of wages for students employed in the federal work study, a reasonable amount for training related to federal work study employment, a reasonable amount for travel directly related to employment in a federal work study community service position, up to 80% of its job location development program to develop regular and community service positions for the school students, if your school would have this job location development program, as well as a school's work colleges program, if it are costs for the school's colleges program, if it participates in this program. So what type of employment is eligible for federal work study? So eligible federal work study employment covers a wide range of jobs, including internships, practica, and assistantships. Eligible employers for federal work study jobs include the school itself, including proprietary schools under certain conditions, state or local public agencies if the work is in the public interest, and we'll go over what public interest means. Federal agencies other than the Department of Ed if the work is in the public interest, private nonprofit organizations if the work is in the public interest, and for-profit organizations. So nonprofit schools and public schools may employ a student to work for the school itself. Jobs can include certain services for which the school may contract, such as food service, cleaning, maintenance, and security. A proprietary school may also employ a student to work on campus, but only in community services jobs, or it can be in non-community service jobs, but the community service job that provides student services complements the student's educational program or vocational goals to the maximum extent possible, and it does not involve soliciting potential students to enroll at the school. So if it's a non-community service job at a proprietary school, then those three options: it must provide student services, complement the student's educational program, and it does not involve soliciting potential students to enroll at the school. So we'll continue on with eligible employment. The federal work study jobs may be on or off campus, and as mentioned, work may need to be in the public interest. So let's go over what does public interest mean. Regulations define work in the public interest as work performed for the national or community welfare rather than work performed to benefit a particular interest or group. So we'll go over some examples. It might be easier to say what is not considered to be public interest. So that would be, it primarily benefits a member of a limited membership organization, such as a credit union or a religious order or co-op. Is for an elected official who is not responsible for the regular administration of federal, state, or local government. Is its work as a political aid for any elected official. Considers the student's political support or party affiliation when hiring the student. Involves any partisan or nonpartisan political activity. Involves lobbying on the federal, state, or local level. So if certain restrictions apply to federal work study employment for proprietary schools, these schools may employ students on or off campus in community service jobs. As I said before, though, however, institutional employment other than community service must be performed on campus for proprietary schools and must provide student services that do not involve the solicitation of other potential students. So more with the eligible employment, federal, state, and local laws governing regular employment also apply to federal work study. Federal work study employment may not be used to replace or displace regular employees. Moreover, if the employer is not the school itself, the school must have a written agreement with the organization providing the job. So if you work in your federal work study department, if you need a model of an off-campus employer written agreement, this would be available in volume 6, chapter 2 of the FSA handbook. So all federal work study, whether on or off campus, has certain conditions and limitations. Federal work study employment must not displace regular employees by taking jobs usually filled by full-time employees, replace a full-time employee whose position was eliminated. This would also be considered displacement. Impair existing service contracts, involve political activity, or involve religious activity. A school may receive academic credit for employment in a federal work study position. A student receiving academic credit in a federal work study position must be paid at the same rate as if no academic credit were received. The student should be paid only if the employer would normally pay others for performing the same work in the same position, and should not be paid for receiving instruction in a classroom, laboratory, or other academic setting. So let's do another question, review questions. Okay, so to qualify for federal work study, a student must meet which of the following criteria? This is kind of the same thing. So general Title IV student eligibility criteria, must meet that for federal work study. Is everybody asleep? I know this is long, a long day. So yes, of course, general Title IV student eligibility criteria is needed. Do they have to demonstrate financial need? Yes, they have to demonstrate financial need. Okay. Must they be enrolled at least half-time?
No, yes, no, no, no,
Okay,
no.
so you're mostly right. Yeah, the answer is no. They do not have to be enrolled at least half-time. They can be enrolled at less than half-time and still receive federal work study. How about be enrolled or accepted for enrollment as an undergraduate, graduate, or professional degree student?
Sorry about that. Hey, you can be 1 credit.
Yeah.
1 credit. You can be taking a PE class.
You're still less than half.
That's right.
About summer. What about a summer break? Can students do work study on a summer break if they're not enrolled in any credits?
I believe so.
I know the answer, but I'm asking you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. But you have to count a portion of what they earn as a resource in the upcoming year.
Oh.
So, and it's basically what they earn minus taxes and transportation. And we like at our campus, we say 50% used as a resource in the upcoming term. But yeah, during periods of non-enrollment, if the students, we make sure they have a FAFSA filed, that they're registered. You have to make sure that they are going to be attending in the upcoming period, because it does have to be counted as a resource. Now, we check to see if the student's registered. If something crazy happens and they drop and it doesn't work out, then we can document that, hey, the student was registered. We had every reason to believe they were going to attend, blah, 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 blah.
Thank you, Melissa. How about work only on campus? Do they have to work only on campus? Correct. They do not have to work only on campus. Great, thanks. So schools must make a reasonable portion of their federal work study funds available to full-time and part-time students. Yeah, we kind of just went over this. This is true. And this is, again, full-time, three-quarter time, half-time, and less than half-time. So the minimum and maximum annual offer amounts for federal work study program are, might be a little bit of a trick question.
I had to look twice myself. Wait, what?
So the answer is the last one. There are no minimum and maximum annual offer amounts beyond what the school sets in its own federal work study packaging policy. Okay, so this one I threw in here. I thought this would be a little bit fun to do. We're just going to go through, I'm going to say a job, and then you guys are going to say if it's public interest or not in the public interest. So remember, work in the public interest is work performed for the national or community welfare rather than work performed to benefit our particular interest or group. So how about work as a political aid for an elected official? You could just say yes or no.
Not public interest. No, not.
Great. Yay. Lobbying on the federal, state, or local level.
No.
Oh, yay. Providing childcare services to members of the local community.
Yes. Yes.
Yay.
Yes.
Okay. Work for an elected official responsible for the regular administration of federal, state, or local government. This one's a little weird because it's if you don't catch it right, but this would be public.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Yay, okay. Providing healthcare counseling for a free state health clinic.
Yes.
Yes, great. Missionary work for a religious order.
No.
Perfect. How about work involving a nonpartisan or work involving a partisan political activity?
No.
Great.
No.
Work providing general research assistance in the local public library.
Yes.
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 Great, guys. Thanks. Thank you, Grace. Okay, next we're going to review payments to the students for federal work study. So like a regular job, the student earns federal work study wages when he or she performs the work. Undergraduate students are paid federal work study wages only on an hourly basis. Graduate students may be paid on an hourly or a salary basis. Original copies of timesheets and other records of the hours worked on a daily basis must be certified by the student supervisor and maintained at the school. Again, we always say document, document, document. Regardless of who pays the student, the school must ensure the student always is paid for any work performed. Federal work study employment is governed by employment positions, including pay that are appropriate and reasonable according to the type of work performed, the geographic region, and the employee's proficiency to do the job. Federal, state, and local laws governing regular or non-federal work study employment also apply to federal work study jobs. Federal work study employers must pay students at least the federal minimum wage, which right now is $7.25 an hour. Federal work study workers may not be paid the some minimum training wage otherwise allowed under current labor laws. Some states have set minimum wage levels higher than the federal level. If this is the case in the school state, students must be paid the higher state minimum wage. But even if a state or local law allows a wage rate lower than the federal minimum wage, for most employees, a federal work study student still must be paid at least the federal minimum wage rate. And federal work study employees must be paid at least once per month. So I just have a question. I didn't put it in here, but so let's say a student, Central College is establishing wage rates for its federal work study position and wants to pay a higher wage to students with the lowest EFCs. Can they do this? Perfect. No, correct. Wage rates must not be based on a student's financial need. The only time the EFC is considered is during the awarding process, not in the hourly wage. Wages should be based on the type of work performed, the geographic region, and the employee's proficiency to do the job. I'm tongue-tied. So continuing on with payments, schools may use various means to pay federal work study wages. Payments may be made by check or similar instrument, credit to the student's school account if the student has given written authorization. Electronic funds transfers EFT to a student's designated bank account. non-cash contribution for the non-federal share of wages, such as tuition and school-provided services and equipment. Schools may pay the non-federal share of the student wages in the form of non-cash contributions, such as tuition, fees, services, or equipment for the non-federal portion of the student wages. So the federal share of federal work study wages may not be used to pay fringe benefits such as sick leave, vacation pay, holiday pay, or to pay any of the employer's required share of Social Security, workers' compensation, retirement benefits, or welfare or insurance programs. Some students may be exempt from federal tax withholdings, once others may be exempt from the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, FICA taxes if enrolled, regularly attending classes, and employed on campus. There is flexibility to pay federal work study as students by major disasters, which we've all just gone through this. So an institution located in an area affected by a major disaster as determined by the Department of Ed may pay disaster affected students for a period of time during which they were prevented from fulfilling their federal work study obligations. This time period cannot exceed 1 academic year. Institutions still must meet the matching requirements as discussed earlier, unless the Department of Ed waives them. Payments made to students must be equal to or less than the amount of federal work study wages the student would have earned if the student had been able to complete his work application for the year. So a disaster affected student is a student that is enrolled at an eligible institution who received federal work study offer for the award year during which the major disaster occurred, earned federal work study wages for the award year prior to the disaster, was prevented from fulfilling their federal work study obligation for all or part of the award period due to the major disaster, and was unable to be reassigned to another federal work study position. So I know this just happened, due to COVID. Our students at our school, I think every school, they were still paid for federal work study because they weren't able to actually do their jobs, and we weren't able to get them a different type of work study position. So they were still paid. Some of our students, and Grace, I know with you working with your graduate students, some of our students we were able to get to do some online federal work study. So they were able, still to work and get the regular work study funds. All right, great. Okay, moving right along. Next, we're going to talk about the community service requirement for the federal work study program. A school must use at least 7% of its federal work study allocation to compensate students employed in community service positions. In meeting the 7% community service expenditure requirement, a school must employ at least one federal work study student as either a reading tutor for preschool age or elementary school children, or in a family literacy project performing family literacy activities.
Laura, sorry, Laura, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we do have one question from your prior slide in the chat, asking for a little bit of clarification on the non-cash. So asking about the non-federal portion of a student's work study pay can be non-cash. What does that mean?
So I'm not that involved in this with my work on my campus, but so if one of you want to jump in, but I know it has to do with the non-cash. It means that it could be maybe tuition or fees or services or equipment that is used for the students' wages. So I think it's instead of getting paid, they might be the tuition
like
might
a
be
waiver,
yeah,
like a waiver for costs associated with their program.
Or fee waivers and items such as that. Does that
I feel
help?
like this could maybe be used in a situation like where you have like a resident assistant and you may be using work study funding to pay like their stipend portion of their job. Maybe I'm just speculating as to when you could be using this, but
Those are some good examples, I think.
Okay. Does that answer their question? Are they okay?
yes, she says thank you.
Okay. Good question. It helps me too. So. Okay. So back to the community service work requirement. So let's say if a school does not meet either the community service expenditure requirements, the school must return the federal work study funds to the Department of Ed. The amount returned is the difference between the amount the school should have spent for community service wages and the amount actually spent. A school may request a waiver of one or both of the community service expenditure requirements. To obtain the waiver, the school must demonstrate that meeting the requirement would cause undue hardship to its students. Just the fact, spider on me, just the fact that it would be difficult for the school to comply with the requirement is not a sufficient basis for granting a waiver. So we're going to continue on with community service. Community service is defined as services designed to improve the quality of life for community residents, particularly low-income individuals, or to solve particular problems related to their needs. Included in the definition of the community service are childcare services and support services offered by the school to the students with disabilities. So just a few examples of other types of community service positions. They may be clerical or support positions at a food bank, career counselors at a state unemployment office, aides at on-campus childcare facility if the childcare, this is the important part, is open and accessible to the community. Service positions to prevent or control crime in the community. Instructional aides who prepare materials for family literacy project activities. Community service jobs can be located on campus if the services are open and accessible to the community. That's the main part to remember. So this means that the services must be publicized to the community and that the general public uses the services. The school itself cannot be considered the community for this purpose. In identifying federal work study community service jobs, a school is expected to consult with local nonprofit, governmental, and community-based organizations. A school is also required to inform all eligible students of the opportunity to perform community service. So that's also important. The school is required to inform all eligible students of the opportunity to perform community service. So there is more information about federal work study community service jobs, and this would be in the FSA handbook in volume 6, chapter 2. So students may be paid for reasonable amounts of time spent in training for and travel to and from community service jobs. If a school pays a student for time spent traveling to their federal work study community service job, the Department of Ed recommends the student report those hours separately from the work hours on their timesheet. This separation of the travel hours from the hours worked will help the student's supervisor to monitor and ensure the amount of reported travel hours is reasonable. The authority to pay for travel time applies only to federal work study students employed in community service jobs. However, as noted earlier, training may be paid for any federal work study position. So travel is for community service, training can be for any work study position. So we're going to do a few questions. If a student begins working in a federal work study job before the financial aid office offers the student federal work study funds for the award year, the school doesn't have to pay the student. Is this true or false?
False.
Great, this is false, because like a regular job, the student earns federal work studies wages when he or she performs the work. An undergraduate student must be paid on a blank basis, whereas a graduate professional student may be paid either on a blank or blank basis.
Hourly or salary.
Great, thank you so much. Perfect. So as of January 2021, what is the federal minimum wage?
$7.25.
That is correct, and that has been since the year of 2009. So I know it's been in the news lately, so hopefully that'll get changed. So the next question, if a state has a higher minimum wage than the federal minimum wage, what is the federal work study employer in that state allowed to pay the student federal work study employee?
The state wage.
That is correct, the higher state minimum wage. We want to pay these students. If a state's minimum wage rate is the same as the federal minimum wage rate, but the state allows for a wage rate lower than the federal minimum wage, what is the federal work study employer in the state allowed to pay the student?
Federal minimum.
That is correct. Thank you, guys. So federal work study payments made to a disaster affected students must be blank the amount of federal work study wages the student would have earned if he or she had been able to complete their work obligation for the award year.
Got a lot of people saying equal or less, equal to or less than.
That is correct. Yay.
Good job.
Yes. A school must expend at least what percentage of its federal work study allocation to pay students employed in community service positions?
7%. Got a bunch of them.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, guys.
Good job.
Okay, so we got a little bit more of some community service activities here. We're going to read through these and then we're going to say if they would be yes or no, if they would be eligible to be a work study position. So the first one, Marcia is a political science major and wants to work evenings and weekends for her state senator as an aide, providing clerical support in his candidacy for re-election.
No.
That is correct. This is a no, because it's in a politician's re-election. Okay, next one. Peter is attending Lake, I'm not even going to say that, college in New Orleans, Louisiana, and he wants to work evenings and weekends on the Community Emergency Preparation and Response Training Project, which also provides weatherization of low-income housing. Is this yes or no?
Yes, we have lots of yeses.
Yeah, that is correct. Great job. Greg is a child development major and wants to work as a child care service provider in an on-campus child care facility for university faculty and staff.
We have a no, we have a yes, we have a no.
Yeah, this one's a little confusing. It's actually going to be no. And that is because in order for on-campus child care services to meet the definition of community service, the child care facility must be open and advertised to the local community beyond just the university campus and its employees. Okay, a few more. Jan is seeking her Master of Education degree and wants to work as a substitute mathematics or science teacher at a local high school on days in which she does not have classes. This one is actually going to be a no, and it's because she's going to work as a substitute math teacher, and that would, she'd be considered a regular. It wouldn't be federal work studies. She's going to be paid as a substitute teacher. Okay, Cindy is in an instructional design major and wants to work weekends as an instructional aide who prepares materials in a family literacy project that provides services to families of local preschool age children.
Yes, yes, yes.
Perfect, you guys are great. Bobby is an environmental sciences major and wants to work evenings and weekends in a conservation corps program which provides services for insect disease, rodent, and fire prevention and control in a low-income housing area. This is a yes. You guys got it.
Good.
And that's all I have.
Good. Good job. Good job. Anybody have any questions for Laura? Not as though you've been asking them throughout though, but just any here at the end of the session? That was really good. A lot of good questions, right? We enjoy those exercises. They kind of bring things home for us. So as you can see, that is the end of our day today. And we are again a little bit early. I don't think anybody gets upset with the a little bit early outs.